If credit card interest confuses you, you are not alone. So here's how it works. So every credit card has an APR, that is the interest rate, and it can range anywhere from 18% to 30% depending on your credit. That interest is charged on any balance that you do not pay in full monthly. So let's say your statement balance is $1,000 and you only pay 100 towards that $1,000 statement balance. You'll owe interest on the $900 balance that was not paid in that statement period. That's how people get stuck, because the longer you carry a balance, the more interest you will pay. So I'm going to give you 3 ways you can save on interest. The first one is always try to pay more than the minimum payment. Second, try to pay before the statement date if you can. Third, you can call all of your credit card companies and ask them for a payment assistant program. What that does, if you're approved, is it will lower your APR or possibly lower your minimum payment that's due. Trust me, call them. It works. We did it when we started this journey and we have saved thousands on interest. So go ahead, and if this helped you in any ways, drop a thumbs up in the comments, and don't forget to hit that follow button, because I'm always bringing you guys tips and tricks that we are learning along this journey. The financial mistake that I wish someone was able to stop me from making is my car. Now I pay $1,054 a month and my interest rate is 4%. I owe a little over 57,000 on it. I took it in a while back, about a month and a half ago, to try to trade it in, and they appraised it at 40,000, which tells you that I am heavily upside down on this car. And here's the part that I had to face. I've overcome online gambling. I used to spend thousands and thousands of dollars on that, but by the grace of God, I was able to stop. This car, this is different, because this is my responsibility, where I have to make a payment that I said that I was going to make until it's completely paid off or till I'm able to get out from under it. I used to tell myself that I deserve this car, but it has actually taught me one of the most expensive financial lessons of my life. Just because you can pay an amount absolutely does not mean that you can afford it. So if you are thinking about upgrading your car or going out and purchasing a new car, please, please learn from me. Do not just look at the monthly payment. Look at the long-term financial impact that it's going to make. Some financial decisions you can walk away from, but some you are tied to till the end.
If y'all don't do nothing else in life, please make sure y'all borrow from your phone. Emphasis on how I said borrow and not withdraw, because if you withdraw, don't do that shit. They're gonna tax you. That shit don't make no sense. But borrow! Please borrow from that 401k. You're gonna have to pay that back money back, obviously. And then there's interest, but the interest goes to you. Please make sure you borrow shit to go on vacation. Borrow from your 401k to buy a house, a car. Just borrow from it, because when you die, you're not getting that money. That shit go back to the state if you don't got no beneficiaries, or to your family. And again, okay, it's gonna say your family, but are you using it? No, because you're dead. Borrow that shit while you live. I'm telling you, that's the best thing that you could ever do to help your life. Please borrow from your 401k.
I became a millionaire in my early 20s and financially free by 25. These are my 3 best tips I can give you as a self-made millionaire. Number 1, you have to live below your means. Stop buying dumb shit. If you're not making over $500,000 a year, you shouldn't be driving a German car. Instead, you should be driving a Toyota or a Hyundai. Also, you shouldn't be wearing Gucci, Louis Vuitton, or Dior. Instead, you should be wearing Zara or H&M. Number 2, you have to find a way to make money in your sleep. If you don't, you're gonna have to work until you die. And the best place to create a passive income source is by investing in real estate. And nowadays, you don't need as much capital as you think to invest in real estate. There's so many great programs and ways to get into deals. Number 3, become a contrarian. Stop following the crowd. A person who walks alone is usually the one who goes furthest in life. Follow for more tips like this.
Adults in this country can correctly answer less than half of basic financial literacy questions on the standard test researchers use to measure this nationally. 49% to be exact, which is essentially the same score people got back in 2017 on the identical set of questions. Almost a decade has passed since then, with an entire economic cycle in between, and the needle on basic money knowledge has barely moved at all across that whole stretch of time. Ask people to grade their own financial knowledge honestly, and the picture gets a little more uncomfortable to sit with. 47% of adults give themselves a C or worse when asked to rate their own personal finance skills, which means nearly half the country is walking around already knowing they don't really understand money well, without necessarily doing much to change that fact day to day. That's not a small confidence gap tucked away in a survey. That's most of a generation quietly admitting, when nobody's really watching, that the system never actually taught them this in any serious way.
Being financially illiterate is one of the most expensive things you can be. And this is coming from somebody who did not grow up learning about money and who actually had to learn the hard way. Because when you think about it, you have predatory lenders, you have higher interest rates, living in hotels that cost more than people's rent and mortgage. But the thing about it, you can't escape it. You can educate yourself, you can become financially literate, because the stress, that's not something that you want to deal with. And I'm not talking about, let me just go to yoga and take a few deep breaths stress. I'm talking about generational trauma, childhood trauma stress that has you spinning emotionally and you don't even know why. So that all ends today.
I trained 4 people with between 2 and 3 years experience. And what they don't know is quite scary. And one of these people had done level 2 of the CFA. So she's done 2 years of studying the CFA. And there's still huge gaps in the financial knowledge. And it amazes me. I mean, what other profession has no formal training program? Now, I know we've got the CFA, but I don't think the CFA really equips you to be a financial analyst and really equips you to understand the financial statements, which is shocking.
And this isn't just an abstract embarrassment sitting in a report somewhere. The National Financial Educators Council estimated that financial illiteracy costs the average American roughly $948 a year in real, avoidable losses, overdraft fees, high-interest borrowing that could have been avoided, undersaving for goals that mattered, late payments that snowball into bigger problems. Multiply that across the country, and the collective cost clears $246 billion annually, all traceable back to gaps in basic money knowledge.
At this point, I seriously think Gen Z is just screwed. In 2026, Gen Z just simply earns way less than it costs to survive. The average Gen Zer makes about $25K a year, which is around $21,000 a month, and spends basically all of it on bills or rent. Nearly half of Gen Z runs out of money before the end of the month ends, and that's not just budgeting, that's just survival at that point. And don't get me started on student loan debt, because the average Gen Zer also has about $30K of student loan debt on top of all of that. We are spending more on essentials than any other previous generation, and wages just keep going down, and the cost of living just keeps going up. You're not failing in life. The system is just has completely fucked us over. Budgeting does help, don't get me wrong. I still use mine to budget and track all of my expenses, but the system is still failing us.
Gen Z isn't lazy or unmotivated. They are rationally adapting to an economy where traditional milestones have become mathematically impossible at traditional ages. I really like this Business Insider piece about 25 being the new 21, and it reveals something really interesting around how economic reality shapes generational behavior. You know, when the path to adulthood becomes more expensive and less certain, young people adapt by taking longer to walk it. And the data in the article talks through, how college costs have gone up, entry-level wages have stagnated, housing prices have gone up a lot more relative to income. The traditional timeline for independence becomes more fraught rather than something that just kind of everybody did on a pre-described path. And, previous generations could reasonably expect that working hard in your early 20s would lead to some sort of financial independence. But today's young people, are often saying that working really hard in your early 20s might lead to financial survival, with independence coming later, if at all. And that's why we're seeing a lot of trends of younger people living with their parents longer, taking longer to kind of reach some of those traditional milestones, et cetera. And what might look like arrested development can often be very strategic, right? Like, why rush into paying a ton of rent when you're only making $35,000 a year? Like, why not just live with your parents instead? Why get married and start a family when you can't afford healthcare for yourself? And this delayed timeline also reflects changed family dynamics. When parents, especially like older boomer parents, can provide that financial support that previous generations maybe couldn't offer, staying at home longer becomes a very rational wealth building strategy rather than a potential sign of failure. And the cultural narrative around this shift is particularly interesting. I think some older generations interpret this delayed independence as laziness or entitlement, but they're missing how economic conditions have fundamentally changed the risk-reward calculations around traditional adult milestones. From a financial psychology perspective, Gen Z's approach might actually be more mature than previous generations. They're making decisions based on mathematical reality rather than cultural expectations. But the challenge is that this delayed timeline can create its own psychological stress. When you're 25 and still living with your parents, it's hard not to feel like you're behind, even if you're adapting to these circumstances that you're currently in. So it's really important to remember that generational differences in financial behavior usually reflect economic conditions more than cultural values. So when the economy changes, rational behavior changes too.
The gap isn't spread evenly across age groups either. Gen Z averages just 38% correct on these same standardized questions, the lowest of any generation tested, with more than a third answering 7 or fewer questions correctly out of the full set. That's despite being the generation with the most access to financial information in human history, sitting in their pocket at all times.
Things my parents taught me about money that schools didn't. Schools teach you how to earn money, but very few people teach you how to multiply it, and that difference is everything. First is that you don't build real money on salary alone. If your only income is tied to your time, then your growth is capped at 24 hours a day. I try to keep 5 income streams at all times, whether that be exposure to broad market ETFs, equity, real estate. Some people have a side business. Next, the younger you are, the more risk you can take. In your 20s and 30s, that means heavily allocating your money into equities rather than overloading on bonds. With decades ahead of you, volatility is uncomfortable but not catastrophic. Lastly, any cash sitting in your bank is losing value. Inflation averages about 3% long term, so that means your money halves in value every 20 years if it just sits there.
You're going to be that rich friend that makes $30,000 every single month. It's going to be you. How do I know it's going to be you? Because the algorithm doesn't just show this content to anyone. It shows it because you've been scrolling nonstop, seeing opportunity after opportunity pass you by. And you've honestly yet to choose something. I'm going to give you another opportunity. You can choose to do it or not. Well, first, you're going to go to YouTube and you're going to find a viral creator. Then you're going to clip this content using AI softwares like EasySlice.ai. What this AI is going to do is every single time that channel creates a new video, it's going to detect that upload. It's going to auto-clip with AI and then instantly post to all of your social medias. You can monetize your social medias with content rewards. You can get paid anywhere from 50 cents to $10 per 1,000 views. So if you get a video that gets 1 million views across all of your social medias, you just made up to $10,000. At this point, nothing's stopping you. The only thing that could be is your own laziness and your limiting self-beliefs.
That access hasn't necessarily translated into real understanding, which is really the twist sitting in the middle of this whole story. Nearly 70% of Gen Z adults say they turn to TikTok or YouTube specifically to learn about money, more than any formal source combined, including school, parents, or a bank itself. The information is genuinely everywhere now, more than any generation before has ever had access to. Whether it's accurate, complete, or actually useful for someone's specific financial situation is a separate question entirely, one the raw access numbers alone don't answer.
The New York State Education Department is supporting a new personal finance instructional requirement for all public school students in kindergarten through grade 12. This instructional requirement will be phased in over the next 2 years. Students will learn essential skills such as managing money, budgeting, saving, and investing. The result? Graduates who are financially literate, ready to manage money, avoid debt, build wealth, and plan for the future.
Give me 60 seconds and I will show you how easy it is to make a budget. We can break a budget down into 3 categories. It's your income, it's your fixed expenses, and it's your variable expenses. Income is very obvious. It's the money that you make throughout the month. So this is money from a job, a side hustle, if you're receiving child support. After we calculated our monthly income after tax, we then need to focus on the fixed expenses. Fixed expenses are expenses that do not change throughout the month. Things like rent, internet, car payment, they don't typically increase every single month, so that is considered a fixed expense. When you subtract your monthly fixed expenses from your income, that shows you how much money you have left for your variable expenses. Groceries, gas, electricity, that always go up and down. Because those expenses always fluctuate, a great way to get a typical average of what you're spending every month is to track your spending. If you typically spend by using a credit card or a debit card, you could look at your bank statement. The bank statement is going to show you all of your transactions throughout the entire month. That's how you could start to somewhat develop an average of what you typically spend throughout the month. And that's how to easily make a budget. It shows you how much money's coming in and how much money's going out. If you have more money going out than coming in, to see if there's anything in here that we could cut out or do less of to try to save money. You could just Google image budgeting template. There's so many. Pick one that works for you and then get started.
Some of this is starting to shift at the institutional level, slowly but measurably. 27 states now require a personal finance course to graduate high school. 3 times as many states as required it back in 2020, just a few years ago. The gains have shown up most clearly in schools serving lower-income communities specifically, which is exactly where this kind of education tends to matter most in practice, not just as a talking point in a policy debate.
Take your monthly income, multiply that by 300. That's how much you need to invest to replace your monthly income. Take your monthly income, multiply that by 0.2. That's the minimum that you should be investing monthly each month. Take your monthly expenses, so your transportation, your car insurance, your gas, your phone bill, your rent, mortgage, childcare, whatever it is, all of your monthly expenses. Multiply that by 3. That's how much you should have saved in your emergency fund, which should also be stored in a high-yield savings account. Lastly, take your monthly income and multiply that by 0.5. That should be how much you spend on expenses each month. Try not to go over that.
Take your monthly income and multiply it by 0.55. That's the maximum you should aim to spend on essentials like housing, groceries, and transportation. Then take your monthly income and multiply it by 0.05. That's your guilt-free spending money. Use it however you want without feeling bad. Then take your monthly income and multiply it by 0.1. If you have debt, use that money to pay it down each month. If you're debt-free, add it to your investments. Take your monthly income and multiply it by 0.15. That's how much you should aim to save for short-term goals like buying a home, getting a car, taking a vacation, or anything else you're working towards. And lastly, take your monthly income and multiply it by 0.15. That's how much you should aim to invest every month to build long-term wealth. Save this video so you can come back to it and follow for more Canadian personal finance content.
If you feel behind on this as an adult, and a lot of people genuinely do based on these numbers, the advice from educators is refreshingly simple. Start with whatever decision is actually in front of you right now. A credit card balance, a 401k contribution, a budget that never quite adds up, instead of trying to learn everything about money all at once from the ground up. More than half of Americans currently say inflation is their single biggest financial worry, which makes this exact knowledge gap more expensive to carry than it would have been in a calmer economy. Did school actually teach you anything real about money, or did you learn it the hard way like most people seem to have? Tell me in the comments. Cost Crisis covers exactly this kind of thing, so stick around for more. Appreciate you watching.